Hello, my name's Michelle Rayner and I'm Assistant Principal at the Patch Primary School, and in my capacity as environmental educator at that school I was able to spend some time in Scandinavia recently looking at how they deliver their forest school program. In particular Sweden, where I spent several months last year looking at the various landscapes that children interact with in their what's called their Natureskolen program. So what's special about Sweden is everyone knows or has heard about forest schools in Norway or Denmark or Sweden and Finland, because we understand that the children are very connected with nature. But in Sweden in particular, I spent some time having a closer look at what the Natureskolen or nature school actually looks like. And the way they use nature is in three fundamental ways. So essentially, it's a classroom. It's a place where children go out and they learn from observing and drawing and really exploring how the world works and all the things in their local little environment. They collect little artifacts from their walks, they look at those further and they question and they talk to each other about it. So it's very science driven initially. But it's also used as a home. And I would visit an early childhood centre near where I was living in this area out of Malmö. And the children treated the outdoors as their home in a number of ways. So they would have safe spaces, so it was familiar. There would be a place where they would gather, and a place where they would eat, and a place where they would go to the toilet, and a place where they would sleep. And this is replicated in Natureskolen in more rural areas. Malmö is a city, and yet they could utilise a large woodland for their experience. But in other areas where it was more naturalistic or natural wild spaces, their toilet wasn't the portable toilets. They would be taught count 7 bushes, hold a sapling and squat if you're a girl, or stand if you're a boy. And even number 2s, okay, dig a hole and bury it. They were taught things like moderating their body warmth. So when you're cold, you press your hands down. So you're getting circulation going through. So as they taught children how to take responsibility for their body temperature, feeling safe to go to the toilet, being able to rest, being able to eat together, having shared spaces, nature became very safe. It's predictable. So all the wildness is kind of stripped away. It's still there, but they are connecting with it in a really relaxed way. So they also use nature as an enchanted world, and in that way that's where they're doing all their creativity, their imaginative games. They've got a whole series of stories and fairy tales that connect them with nature. So this beautiful interplay of those 3 areas was really interesting to me, because I know in my experience as teacher that children are becoming more and more detached from nature, and they are scared of nature. They're frightened by being in circumstances where they think they might not know what to do. So this Swedish model really strips that away, because they are, they're in control. The things that I loved seeing were the fact that the children were out all the time. So there's a whole range of Natureskolen programs, and in some schools they might just be an hour a day. But the kindergarten that I used to love visiting, and I would walk past every day for like 4 months, I was almost a stalker, but I was watching really interestedly, because on really cold, wet days, I was curious, will they be out? Because they promised me the children are out all day, every day. And that is in fact the case. They would wear these full-on one-piece suits, and they would be in those every day. And they had little fluoro bands on them so they could be seen in the dim light. But they would be out playing all day, every day. And only if the temperature got below -12, they were allowed to spend 3 hours inside. But for the rest of the day, they'd be out. And they would eat outside, they'd sleep outside. All those things I was mentioning before were taking place with these children. And I used to look at them and think, you know, this was a group of 25 children or so. There'd be maybe 4 adults, and they'd be gathering little things. They'd be playing in one area that was predominantly their home base, but they would go for walks through the rest of the woodland, and they'd gather things, and they'd make structures, and they'd climb trees. And it was such a liberating experience of education. What I've put in this little collection of text mentions a couple of things that they all seem to have. So I visited 3 or 4 regularly. They would always have a log ring. The children would be in a circle, every face would be seen, every person equally important. And that's where they would join for food and conversation, stories. They would always have some kind of little shelter that would be comfortable enough to sleep in. And they'd bring in blankets and they'd lay them down on the ground, maybe tarps underneath if it was wet. But the children would generally have their own little bits of equipment, which I've started doing at my school. So they have a little bag, and inside a big plastic tarp that's just been cut into little squares that are folded and folded and folded and put in there. So you can sit wherever you like, and you never have to worry about being wet. The landscapes for the really young children, the 1 to 3-year-olds would, you know, largely be flattish, but it'd have some little mounds. It'd have places that could be, you know, containers for water, or ultimately even having a little fire. And they would love to have their fires. And they had invented these beautiful long metal rods with a little fork at the end, so they could stand that distance, in fact perfect for now, but they'd be able to stand that distance, safe distance around the fire, and cook their little damper or their marshmallow or whatever it was, and really interact with these natural elements of fire and wind and rain. And the children would just take it as so natural that they're part of that they understood the feelings of cold and warmth and the wind. And these experiences I'm hearing from children in our own school, because recently, after an initial visit to Denmark, I brought in a policy of no inside play on a wet day. We are not doing this anymore. We're going to play outside, rain, hail or shine, but you need to wear appropriate clothing. So now teachers can still have their cup of tea or do what they have to do in their breaks, knowing that just because it started raining, they don't have to rush to their class and have kids all coming in and all heightened. The children are loving playing outside in the rain. They love the experience of being out there when the action's happening, rather than quick, come inside, close the door. So some of these principles that we've seen happening so successfully in Scandinavia are directly able to be translated into the Australian landscape. So essentially, the Natureskolen program is all about stimulating curiosity. It's giving children the opportunity to explore, to understand through games and outdoor experiences the world around them. It embeds adventure and fun into as much as they can possibly manage outdoors. There's still the mundane tasks of, you know, cleaning up, putting away, but children enjoy these when they take responsibility for them and feel an ownership of the space. And they build independence of these children and resilience through positive but challenging experiences and life lessons. And we find in our own context at the Patch Primary School that once you give children permission to choose clothing appropriate to the weather, then they build a physical resilience. They know they can modify their connections with the environment, so they can get warm, they can get cool, and through that sense of empowerment for physical resilience, it taps into their social emotional resilience as well. It empowers them to take charge. So just summarising, a child from the nature school says, I want to feel the sun, the wind and the rain. I become alert and I learn easier when I am allowed to exercise my body. Thank you for listening, everybody.